Sanibonani Maswati kithi kuto tonke tinkhalo
You seem
telive.
to have been frozen.
Sanibonani Maswati kithi kuto tonke tinkhalo telive la kaNgwane siyanivusela lapha ka Visionary Perspectives eSwatini lonivuselako nalonibingelelako njengenhlala yenta nguye Comrade Velaphi Mamba, the Black Mamba, the one and only Black Mamba. Sicale ngekuxolisa kuphuta kungena besisasotha kona tindzaba tekuthi nasesingenile sivakale kahle khona emakhaya. Ngicela ke ukuthi nisangena nente njengenhlala yenta la nisherishe nibitane emakhaya ukuthi seyikhona iBlack Mamba. Namhlanje sizabe sikhulumisa indzaba lemcoka kakhulu eveni. Sihloko sethu njengoba besis-advertiser sithi the fault lines of media regulation. Why media is under attack eSwatini. Lokusho ukuthi loluchekeko lolukhona mayelana netindzaba tetinsatheli nebantfu labatekana labakhulumisa tindzaba eveni. Ngabe kwende njani imbambambamba kuthi uhulumende afune kusukuma abe ngumuntu lokhanya kwekuthi emaswati noma ke ma-journalists ne-media ucala kwekuthi ayitolike kwekuthi isebenze kanjani. Angisho ke lokho ukuthi besizamile nekuthi la umhlonishwa waseManzini East long MP Welcome wakwaDlamini besimcelile naye kusabe khona la ehlelweni, kodwa ke njengoba nibona ugcine angakaphumeleli ngetizathu ke nathi lesingadiconzi kahle, kodwa la ehlelweni siyayesithanze lokuthi onke ama-voices abe khona, abantu bakhona ukudefenda ema-positions abo. Namuhla ke Maswati akithi lolu hlelo sitawuswitcha. It is going to be an English session given that we have a guest from South Africa, so ngeke sikhulume ngeSwati njengenhlala yenta ndasicolela ke kulelo hlangothi Maswati akithi. A very good evening Swaziland, Eswatini, and today on Visionary Perspectives Eswatini we are looking at a very interesting topic, like I've already said, and I have the pleasure of hosting very seasoned and senior media practitioners and editors in the Swaziland space and also in South Africa more broadly. Joining me today for this important conversation is the editor of The Nation magazine, Bheki Makhubu. We have the editor of Swaziland News, Zwemart, and then we have a representative of the South African Press Council, Mr. Themba Sepotokele, who has graciously agreed to join us today. Let me take this opportunity to greet each of them and grant them some time to say hello to you at home before we start the program. Let me start with you, Zwemart. Can you greet the listeners and the viewers at home?
Thank you, Mr. Mamba. Thank you for having me on Visionary Perspective. I really appreciate to be part of this discussion that is bordering around the freedom of the media. I hope the members of the public will be very informative with regards to what is happening in the so-called state regulation.
Thank you, Mr. Dlamini. Mr. Makhubu, please unmute yourself and greet eMaswati.
Yes, thank you, Rolin. Thank you for having us here to discuss what is an important topic. Some of us, some people will know, have spent pretty much a good part of our journalistic career fighting for media freedom in the country, and with the little energy we have left, we're just doing our bit. That is important in that endeavor. Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you very much, Shoban. Mr. Sepotokele, please greet the viewers at home.
Mr. Mamba, good evening to you, sir. Good evening to the fellow esteemed panelists and also to the listeners. It's important that we have this kind of discussion from the perspective of really understanding, firstly, why we need to have an independent and vibrant media throughout the world, not only in one country, but throughout the world and the continent. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sepotokele. And to the listeners at home, you will bear with us. Mr. Sepotokele is in a load shedding area right now, so he's unable to actually be on video. But we hope that as the program continues, load shedding will be lifted and you will be able to see him before we end this program. Let me start before I hand over to editor Shoban Bheki Makhubu, who is someone who has been in the thick and thin of, like he has said, the kind of very precarious, if not malicious, assault on free expression and the limitations on journalists and media freedom in Swaziland. We recall that in 2014, he was even arrested together with the late T.R. Masego for the power of the pen that they were exercising in terms of critiquing the judiciary, and also just the voice that they had in representing the broader spectrum of Swazi society on critical issues, which then saw them being thrown into jail. But we will get to that later. I just want to quickly summarize, as usual, our framework. We will be looking at a historical overview of the evolution of the media in its current status in Swaziland today, and trying to understand the genesis of this renewed effort at state regulation of the media. And that topic will be handled by Shoban Bheki Makhubu. Then we will look at the transformative power of the media in the modern era, especially in light of digital innovation and the internet revolution. And editor Zwemart Lamini will be tackling that for us, especially given the role of Swaziland News in terms of really kind of heightening and opening up the space for political discourse and other important matters in the country. And then we will have, last but not least, our guest, Mr. Themba Sepotokele, who is going to talk about the South African experience and what lessons Eswatini has to gain and learn from that, given South Africa's position as a democracy in our region, with all its challenges, but at least in terms of media freedom, he is going to give us nuggets and important insights into that question. So broadly speaking, Shoban and other esteemed panelists here today, I've been doing a bit of reading about generally Swaziland's position in terms of media freedom, and largely speaking, the question of freedom of speech, freedom of expression. And I should say that the reports that I've read don't really give a very good and impressive picture of the status of the country. If you look at the reports from the US Bureau on Democracy, Human Rights and Labor, the country report on Swaziland on freedom of expression tells us that even though freedom of the media and freedom of expression are enshrined in the Constitution, they are merely tokenistic and are not really practiced in actual terms. Where we are also seeing a standing moratorium on reporting on the royal family, in particular on critical issues relating to their largesse, their wanton expenditure, their misuse of public funds, and generally the kind of lavish lifestyle that they live at the expense of the Swazi people. I've also looked at Freedom House and what Freedom House ratings are saying about Swaziland. So generally speaking, when you look at Swaziland, you see that overall the rating is 17%, which is 17 over 100. When you look at political rights, it's 1 over 40. When you look at civil liberties, of which freedom of expression, freedom of the media is 16 over 60. So you see that the categorization is really that Swaziland is not free. You go on, you look at the campaign for free expression. I remember that last year they were in Swaziland where the they were engaging a lot of stakeholders and actually delivering a report on the status of free expression in Swaziland. And there again, similar kind of permutations are arising around a political superstructure that really clamps down on freedoms. And this is the operative environment that we see the country in. If you look at Reporters Without Borders, their 2023 report, which is the latest, also cites a widespread control over the media, whether it's broadcast media, whether it's the newspapers, and even attempts to now regulate and clamp down on social media and digital media platforms, and a lot and other sources that I have read. So it takes me then to the question, Shobane, that I'm now handing over to you to really take us in a nuanced way. What are we seeing? This evolution of the media terrain in Swaziland historically, and the current status of the media, and this question of media regulation, what does it mean, and what are the implications thereof?
Well, thank you, Ndoleni. First of all, let me say that, I first walked into a newsroom in January 1988. So that's some 6 years ago. And the media has always been under pressure in this country. Ever since I've been a journalist, everybody who has power in this country has always complained about the media. And, I can recall that to deny something written in by the media, particularly the print media, as untrue was simply taken as, well, banemanga vele, but there was what I call the golden age era of journalism in this country, particularly in the 90s, where we, as journalists, we were able to write more freely, I would say. But that was because of two reasons. The first one was the changes that were going on in South Africa, and we are sandwiched, in three borders by South Africa. And you will recall that the Mandela effect was there all over, and we were no exception to that. So there was a lot of freedom, but in that process, there was a lot of appreciation of where this country needed to change to stay in line with what was going on in the region. Because even in Mozambique, to our east, there were changes going on, the end of the civil war. So, to me, it was the golden age. We really wrote robustly. We tackled many issues, and there were reforms. And one was blessed. I always think that in a way I was blessed that as a journalist at the time, and I was appointed editor quite at a very young age, one was able to interact with politicians at the time and learn a lot about politics of this country, but nuance with African politics in general, and how, because remember that those people who were in power then were the 1960s era of young activists who were part of the African push for independence on the continent and in this country in particular. So they were political animals generally, and one was able to learn a lot from them. But what they did, to their credit, was they engaged us as the media. I mean, I was editor of the Sunday paper, the Times Sunday, and you had cabinet ministers actually writing articles to tackle an issue of public interest. And there were debates going on. In fact, I was reading a book recently about this country, and in 1960s Swaziland, then there was a lot of that. As the country built up to independence, They were writing to newspapers. You remember that in the 1960s, there were political parties in the country. And there was a lot of debate among the different political formations on the format and on the direction the country should take towards independence. And it involved even though he didn't write, he wouldn't do that. But you could see that even King Sopoza was involved in that hot debate. So there was that. And over time, you know, with the frustration, with the change really of personnel, in our political structure, new faces came in to govern and stuff like that, and most of them just couldn't handle the pressure of being in public office, and the hostility returned towards the media, and returned with full force. Now, I've often wondered, particularly after 2005, what exactly happened with the coming in of the Constitution. Because after 2005, the hostility toward the media intensified. And I always say to people, could it be that the Constitution became the problem? Now, why do I say that? I say that because, you know, what is enshrined in the Constitution, as you quoted, international organizations addressing that the freedoms in the Constitution are tokenism. It would appear to me that the structures of authority in the country, the judiciary, the executive, and even the monarchy, felt that their powers were taken away by the Constitution, and that this power, that this right rather to freedom of expression that we now derive from the Constitution, and therefore do not derive from how nice they are to us by letting us be, is exactly what they don't like. Because the problem, if you can look at it this way, most of the rights that are in the Constitution are tokenism, because the authorities in the country feel helpless and they want to assert their authority and do not want to feel beholden to a document that gives us our rights, because perhaps they feel that they have lost power. I don't know. But it has intensified. I mean, anybody who takes a media house to court right now is 99% assured of a victory. And not just a victory because the media is careless, but a victory is assured because that is the media needs to be put in its place. You can think of the judgment against the Swazi Observer by the Supreme Court, where the government spokesman, Alpheus, who, as it turns out, was once a managing director of the Observer, he sued the Observer. And when he got to the Supreme Court awarded him damages, but said there was no defamation against him. But hey, have the money. So you can see that this assault, this drive to cripple the media is intense, and intense to shut it down. For me, it comes down to this concept that we now know called SLAP, which is strategic litigation against public participation. Our leaders just don't want Emaswati to be part of the national discourse, mainly because those who govern are not sure of themselves. Remember, this country in 1973 shut down all political activity. The effect of that is, and we never talk about this, is a new generation of Emaswati was born and grew up and went to school without any political understanding of what makes the world go round, because that was not allowed. They are now there to govern as political leaders, and they have no idea what politics is about, not because they are stupid, but because they are not exposed. So what's the best way to handle the situation? Just stop public discussion, stop public debate, and stop the public from knowing what they do that is wrong, that doesn't help in making this country better, because by Sabana, they are just scared. This is why we're here, with media regulation. What you didn't say in your intro is that the Minister of ICT, who is responsible for media, told Parliament only last week that nowhere in the world is the media regulated by government. So you ask yourself a question: why is the Prime Minister so vociferous in his want to regulate the media, and why is he doing it without checking with the minister? Because you would expect that a Prime Minister would say, we need media regulation. Minister, what happened in the last 20 years? Because he's accusing us of having frustrated the process for the last 20 years. So that when he confronts us as journalists and when he confronts the public with this issue, he is informed by his minister of what exactly has happened 20 years ago. But he's not doing that. He's not interested in the truth. That's why I feel strongly about what he's doing. I know some of my colleagues in the mainstream media are saying, let's do what the Prime Minister wants. But my view is, well, the office of the Prime Minister does not belong to Russell. It's not his personal property. It's not his inheritance. It belongs to the people of Eswatini. Not even the king owns it personally. Even he acts in the interest of Emaswati. So why would we be cowed down to satisfy the insecurities of a man who's been appointed to office? It's not our job to do that. And the Emaswati don't owe him absolute loyalty, because he's not an absolute monarch. He's serving the interest of Emaswati, which means the king has said it many, many times. Let's discuss issues in this country. Let's debate issues so that we don't get into fighting. And here we have a prime minister who says, no, he doesn't want his affairs to be discussed in public because he's too big for that. That can't be right. So for me, and when he spoke to editors recently, you can see that, in fact, he was quite open about the fact that his call for media regulation is personal, of an incident that occurred between him and the Times, where he feels the Times misrepresented certain facts in articles they wrote. So this whole country must now come to a standstill and be shut down from knowing issues simply because he's bringing issues from his previous job into this high office of national importance. I can't see why we should allow that and say it's okay. Because like I say, this is not about him. His job there is to serve Emaswati, not to fulfill his ego issues and make himself feel good about himself. His success should not be measured by how well he can shut us down. And yes, true. As you said, we are well aware of his experience in Rwanda, which he's very proud to tell us about. I don't know whether he thinks we don't know how Rwanda and the media work. Perhaps, but it seems to be, if you look at the world generally, it is a human weakness to look for what is bad that is done by leaders in other countries and then make it look like it's a good thing, and leave out what is good. And King Sopoza wonders about this, that take what is good from other countries and leave out what is bad. But for some reason, today's politicians are changing things and bringing us the worst of what other countries can do just so that they can be secure. But I think it's going to be up to us as media to let Russell get away with this. And remember, if this man is not secure in his position, as it looks like he's not, today it's the media, tomorrow it will be other industries. And we have the makings of a dictator in our hands. Are we going to allow that in a country that is already doing badly internationally? Because the world will ask us a question. Fine, the Prime Minister is doing all these things. What are you doing about it to stop him? And I don't think we can be proud of ourselves to say, well, we just rolled over and made him hoping he's going to be nice to us. You have a South African journalist right there with you. He's probably wondering himself that why are these people allowing these things? And it won't be just him alone, it'll be the whole world. Why are we quiet? Yeah, I think maybe let me leave it at that for now, unless you want me to add something else you want to ask.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Shobane. I think that you have given us some very profound inputs and insights into this question that we are dealing with today. Before I move on to Editor Zwemart Dlamini, I would like you to give us a little bit of nuance in terms of the question you have just spoken to about what is it that we are doing in our organized platforms or even in our individual capacities. I know that you come from the Editors Forum, for example. We had recently the tiff that you had with the MP from Babane East about media regulation. And I don't want to get maybe into that exchange. Safe to say that what is the position of the Editors Forum in this question and the accusation that for 20 years you have failed to self-regulate? That's the mantra that the government, or rather the Prime Minister, is actually using. You have said it very well that we are seeing mixed signals. On the one hand, the minister is responsible for the portfolio of ICT and communications in the country. It's clear that regulating the media is not a good idea. And in and of itself, I think there are conversations to be had about whether Tingundla as a political system, in fact, should even be thinking about regulating the media. Given that it's one of the most oppressive political systems we've seen in recent history. And then the second point I want to make is around this mantra that the Prime Minister appears to be coming with, this mantra of trying to convince eMaswati to be patriots, this narrative of patriotism, as if people that are speaking alternative ideas, people who are speaking or talking to or calling for reforms are not patriotic. The only people who are patriotic are the grovelers, are the people who will toe the line and do what the government says. Is it part of his naivety as someone who has a very light political background, if none at all, or is it really an agenda that is necessary in modern day Swaziland? Just those two.
I think the question of the patriotism can be answered in two ways. First of all, you can see that there's the issue of the Rwanda influence in his mind. He's trying to bring, because that is how Rwanda has been kept where it is now. I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing. They have a history that is completely different to us. So that it's very difficult to say that there's something to learn from their definition of patriotism and incorporate it here. We know this, whether we criticize the government, we criticize the king or anybody, nobody here is not a Swazi and cares for this country. We all do. And the fact that he's the Prime Minister doesn't make him any more a better Swazi than the rest of us. You know, there is, I mean, in my experience as a journalist of more than 35 years, I've seen this thing of people thinking that once they're in power, then they think, and once they're in power, and once they interact with the king more often than the rest of us, then they begin to think they are more Swazi than all of us. They are not. And it's something we've had to confront even when we are having press briefings with the king, where cabinet ministers will begin to tell us what to ask and what not to ask. I mean, I've been in a situation where I've had to tell them that the king is mine too, just as equally he is to them. They are no better than me as in front of the king. Sometimes you have to take matters to be rude in that way because they believe that. I think patriotism for Russell, the way he's looking at it, he thinks supporting him and doing things that he wants is what defines Buswati. I don't know where he gets that idea from. Perhaps it's because having been appointed by the king, he has, he's come to believe that he has divine understanding of what a Swazi is and what it is not. Well, he doesn't, and it's not for him to decide that. We all are Maswati. And we speak and write and about this country because we care for it, So it's a problem that is there. I mean, if you look at the journalists who have just left the media and have become MPs, such as the MP from Babane East, I mean, that's the problem with our politics. And again, it goes back to 1973, that being a politician and being involved in politics takes time, it takes years. But suddenly people just being there have started to believe that, like I say, they have this divine understanding. But for me, I also see that they are scared. They don't want to be written about. They are on the other side now. And they are coming to people like Russell and other politicians who are scared of public scrutiny, and they are presenting themselves as if they know most about how the media works. They're experts. They have the inside track of how media works. And in order to manage the media, perhaps you should put a boot on their necks and squeeze the breath out of them. And because it's one of the things that I found interesting about the three of these guys is how, eager they are to help these insecure politicians by, squeezing the life out of the media. They are carrying favor. They are saying, we know how this thing works. We'll help you, to suppress media freedom. And
Okay, it seems like Shobane, we have lost him there, but very, very, very good insights there. Hoping that he will reconnect, and as he does so, Maswatagisi, let's continue with the conversation. Editor Zweli Martin Dlamini, I want to come to you now, and I'm obviously looking also at the clock there so that we can also give our guest sufficient time to canvass his own aspects of this conversation. We've seen the role that Swaziland News has played in breathing in a new impetus into the political life of the country, not only during the unrest, but generally during even times when the country was in the throes of some kind of blanket state control of public narratives and access to information and all those things. Can you take us a bit on a journey? Welcome back, Shobane. I think if you can just mute, we'll come back to you on the unfinished point around the editors forum. Can you take us briefly around this question of the transformative power of the media? You are one of the people, for example, who has been declared a terrorist. You and this platform that we are using, you have a matter in court against you by the king. You also have a memo against you where public officials are being discouraged from engaging with this platform. What are your views around this subject?
Thank you, Ndulini. Thank you so much for having me in this important discussion. Maybe one can just take you into context with regards to the media suppression in Eswatini. When I arrived in the media about 15 years ago, obviously the constitution was around 5 years after being signed by the king. And the constitution speaks about issues of media freedom. And I started at the Eswatini Observer doing some part-time writing. And what I discovered there is that when you write a story, the story will be twisted to favor a certain narrative. I will make an example. If the story is touching those close to the king and the powerful people like cabinet ministers, the editors will then try to twist the story, and the story will have your name on top, but what will be under your name will be completely different as compared to the story that you have previously submitted. And then having gone through or having worked for some of the newspapers in Eswatini, I discovered that the people of Eswatini are being suppressed. They are being denied information, and the way they think reflects what is being written in the newspapers. I then discovered that actually the government or the royal family is holding the members of the public by the throat by just suppressing information. I will make an example. If the media is telling the people that King Mswati or the royal family is right, it was appointed by God, is an institution that is being endorsed by God, obviously with the power of the media, Mr. Ndrulini, the people will start thinking that way. When in fact, as I've just mentioned to you, I was fully appraised. I was exposed to information, what is happening in the corridors of power, public administration, corruption, and all those stories that I came across were not appearing in the media. Mr. Ndrulini, I then established a newspaper. It was known as Swaziland Shopping. And after that, the government started to monitor what I write. As an investigative journalist, I started publishing stories, hard-hitting stories, and I was told that this newspaper is purely for business, and I must stick to that. I was called several times by the Minister of ICT at the time. His name was Mr. Langamandla. He called me, and I was summoned by the peers. Of course, my engagement with those public officials was different. I'll make an example. The minister at the time even told me that is the king who is not comfortable with the newspaper. But of course, after doing some research, I discovered that even the whole cabinet was uncomfortable. And I was not sure whether they were abusing the name of the king or not, but the way they were framing it when they summoned me to those meetings, it was clear that the whole regime, as Mr. Makhubu has just mentioned, is hostile against the media. They then subsequently shut down the newspaper, Mr. Mamba. And then I sat down and said, with all the experience that I have now, what can I do for the people? Because for me, it wasn't just about writing news. I was just thinking about the over 1 million people who are not exposed to information, who are ignorant with regards to the public affairs in their own country. They are being fed with misinformation, such that, Mr. Mamba, when you engage with the Swazi politically, you can see that this is a generation that has been suppressed when it comes to political information. And then I analyzed the whole situation in Eswatini, Mr. Mamba, when it comes to issues of regulation, having the experience of the newspaper that was shut down. I then said, okay, we have digital platforms like Facebook, like websites. I will make an example. Facebook is registered in America, but it is being used in Eswatini. Then I said, no, if I can register a newspaper outside the jurisdiction of the regime, but name it as the Swaziland News and focus on Eswatini. My intention, Mr. Ndvuleni, because I was aware that the newspaper will be big, considering, because when you establish a newspaper, Ndvuleni, the first thing that you do, you first draft editorial policy. You first analyze the issues that you want to tackle, the line of stories that you want your newspaper to be known for. So having drafted the editorial policy of the newspaper, I discovered that with time or subsequently, the regime will want to fight this newspaper. I was aware of that even before going online, even before launching it. I was aware what they will do. And then I said, no, if the newspaper is registered in a jurisdiction with the rule of law, they will struggle to shut it down. But even if they can try, they will subject themselves under the rules where the newspaper is registered. This is what is happening now, Mamba, because you highlighted about me being taken to court by the regime. I was aware what they were going to do, and I'm aware that they will fail, because issues of jurisdiction, Mr. Mamba, are very important when you talk about the media, because if the Swaziland News was registered in Eswatini, I can assure you that they would have long shut it down. And then, Mr. Mamba, we then started to end the culture of impunity and shape the public discourse when it comes to issues of transparency, accountability. There was a norm in Eswatini that you cannot write about the king. And in my meetings with other editors in Eswatini, because I was also part of the Editors Forum as an executive member, and I was saying, because the king is holding public office, it was the Nation magazine, you know, Mr. Mamba, the Nation magazine will tell us sometimes that the king has been allocated so much in the budget, the king has done this and that. But the other newspapers, the Nation magazine was isolated because it was alone. And at the time, Bheki Makhubu was being persecuted. You'll recall that he was once targeted, but by what we can describe as a judicial dictatorship. The judiciary, when it started to be hostile against the media, Bheki Makhubu was doing a course at the University of South Africa, a law course. So him being exposed to such a cause, his articles started to change. He was focusing more on issues of justice, exposing to the judiciary, judicial dictatorship. He was just helping the country to understand the importance of the rule of law. Because everything, if you can analyze Eswatini, even the judiciary has been captured, is being manipulated to target the media, to target political activists. So we then understand the weaponization of the judiciary through articles from the Nation. And then I said, if I can come in online and try to give the people the voice, because the Nation is published monthly. So even if it was coming with those stories, sometimes you will wait for 1 month to have an article that has been happening for over 30 days. But of course, with this experience, he was able to give us the analysis, this obviously just to make us understand the issue in detail. So with the help of international partners in Ndvuleni, we were able to grow the Swaziland News. And obviously, I was taken to do some training with Amapungane Center for Investigative Journalism and the Dairy Maverick, just to understand how to run an online publication and how to publish an online story, because there's a difference. The dynamics of the fourth industrial revolution, the way you write stories that will be published online is somehow different to which we used to publish in the print media. So I think after those stories, Ndulini, you have touched on issues surrounding or before the unrest. People started to receive information online and they were able to demand accountability in the public administration. And we were able to see even in parliament, we saw members of parliament talking politics, talking about issues that has been raised and exposed through the online platform. And it was able to shape the public discourse. And we think, Yolini, almost there, because at the end, we want a better society. And the media is playing a very, very critical or significant role in this regard.
Thank you very much, Editor, for those inputs that you have made. Quite a lot there, and we can see that the question of the shift from traditional media, you had Swaziland Shopping, for example, which was easy for the government to close down. But now you have a platform that is virtual, that is in the digital sphere. That is now difficult for anyone to singularly just shut down unless they shut down the internet. And one of the things that we see in the reports that I was citing is this whole question of internet shutdowns, the whole question of spying on journalists, the whole question of actually hunting down and killing journalists. If you read reports by the Committee for the Protection of Journalists, you will see that this is becoming a kind of normative standard practice, that journalists' lives are always on the line. But I want to ask you a very specific question, because it seems that the intent to regulate the media, including media in the digital sphere, flows from accusations that the media, in particular in the domains that you are using, is irresponsible, is not patriotic, is slandering people, is libelous, and is spreading fake news. The Swaziland news has oftentimes been painted as nothing more than just a platform for the perpetuation of fake news. We've seen many prime ministers actually using that narrative. How would you defend yourself in particular, but also other journalists in other platforms against such an accusation?
Thank you, Mr. Ndulini. What you must understand about the role of the media is that even without regulation that they intend to do, the media is expected to operate within the confines of the rule of law. The media must always take into consideration issues of human rights, issues of, I'll make an example, issues of privacy, issues of human right to human dignity. The media, Ndulini, can be taken to court by anyone who feels he was unjustly treated or defamed by the media. But of course, there are situations whereby you find those with power abusing the privilege of having or of misusing public funds just to muzzle the media, just to make sure that they launch endless court cases against the media. And that is when you understand that the intention is not to hold the media accountable, but the intention is to silence the media, because there are aspects of the media, even internationally, who are able to see if what we are doing, we are demanding your right to be treated fairly by the media, or you are just abusing court processes to make sure that the media is silenced. So I will make an example. The Swaziland News is registered in South Africa. and is a member of the Press Council. The Press Council was established to ensure that all media organizations under it operate ethically, and anyone who feels this story was published unethically has a right to approach the Press Council and hold the Swaziland News accountable. So, to answer your question, Mr. Mamba, there's just no justification to say the media needs to be regulated by the state just because the media is being reckless in its reporting. Because even in Eswatini, the problem that we have is the fact that the judiciary is hostile against the media. But as I've just mentioned, the media is expected to abide by all the rules of the country. And there was an incident in 2020 whereby the COVID-19 erupted and there were regulations that were put in place. The media was expected to as well abide by those regulations. The media was expected to make sure, even globally, that any information that you publish about COVID-19, because the world was trying to come together collectively and fight COVID-19. So there was a need to make sure that information is accurate, information has been verified. So the media was expected to subject itself to those regulations. So that on its own, Mr. Mamba, in conclusion, is to say, even without what they intend to do by saying they want to regulate the media does not operate in the air. The media it must subject itself to the principles of the rule of law. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Editor, Mr. Dlamini. Before we hop over very quickly to Mr. Themba Sepotokele, Editor Makhubu, please, can you just finish off that question on the Editors Forum?
Yes. So the Prime Minister, sorry about the cutoff connection issues, but it had to do with my device here. So, you know, one of the things that the Prime Minister said was that he's going to rope in the Mbabane East MP as an expert on how to regulate the media. And the point of departure, I think that caused the huge storm was, essentially I was asking, why him? You know, when there are so many Emaswati that understand media. Remember, when this matter was discussed during the 20-year period he so wishes for and is anxious about, experts were brought in. Locally, you had people like Nkonzo Hlatshwayo, you had people like Judge Thomas Masuku, all participating in the question of media regulation, you know, all that 20 years ago. So, you know, it was a very high-level project, you know. Today, for the Prime Minister to simply single-handedly, without even the participation of the relevant ministry, to say he has found the MP as the expert who will help him, doesn't sound right to me. It sounds of a sinister plot against the media. And that's what I'm protesting about, that this thing is not being done with the honest intention to protect perhaps the public from the excesses of the media. And from my reading of the situation, you know, all media everywhere in the world does get it wrong sometimes, but simply because we're not angels, we're human beings like everybody else. But this strong hostility, because when you deal with the media anywhere in the world, you've got to balance two things. One, you've got to balance, yes, the mistakes that the media may make, but also acknowledging that the media also helps society wake up to what could go wrong in the country. And but it seems in our country, the whole thing is more biased towards making sure that the public just never gets to know, not the things that are wrong, but the mistakes that are made by those who govern. And some of us who have been in the media for a long time sort of ascribe to, you know, we might say we're not a democratic country, but at least people like Barnabas Dlamini, who was the prime minister and the longest serving prime minister, always used to tell us at our breakfast meetings that, you know, the Tingulda system is accountable, and that he used to tell us in front of other ministers that, you know, if journalists ask questions, every minister has a responsibility to answer it. It seems to me that Russell is taking a different view and just doesn't feel it necessary. He made an example, for instance, when he was complaining about the minister, that when he was the chief executive of the Disaster Management Agency, he lost some money, donor money, because of what the media reported. That our job is not to protect him so that he can get money. Our job is to expose the wrongs that he does, so that donors know where they're spending their money on, and most importantly, so that Emaswati know what he's doing with money that is intended for their welfare. He cannot argue that it's none of anybody's business what money that is donor funded, that is supposed to help Emaswati, what happens to it. And then he can't take the position that that should, if there are questions on that, those questions should not be asked, and that those nefarious deeds that might be picked up should not be exposed to the public. Again, like I say, this is not his inheritance. And I think he's got a different definition of his job. And we, as a Maswati, have a responsibility to sort of help him, to remind him that Inve Maswati, and you know, the public has a right to know that this man has a different definition of his job than what we all know him to be. But he doesn't seem to want that. Now, on the question of the editors forum, as you asked, unfortunately, it would appear, despite everything that we had discussed before, that they seem to be quite embarrassed about my confrontation with the Prime Minister. They feel that there's nothing wrong that the Prime Minister has done by the manner he's acting, by looking for an MP who's an expert, God knows how. We're not asking the question of how does this man become an expert who's just walked out of a newsroom, to the exclusion of all other people who understand how media regulation, because by the Prime Minister's definition, even international experts don't hold a candle to his newfound expert. I think we have a right to ask that question. He doesn't seem to think that we should. And my colleagues in the media also don't think we should. We should just do what the Prime Minister wants. And I have a serious problem with that. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Editor Makhubu. Thank you, Shoban. I want us now to move this conversation to our guest, and thank you once again, Mr. Sepotokele, for making the time to come here and have a conversation with Emaswati. I think that you have listened also very intently, besides the briefing that we've had, to the voices of the editors that have spoken before you, and placing you at the end was deliberate so that you could also get the kind of context in which this conversation and discourse is being had. Can you please now just give us your kind of broad strokes and kind of granular framework of the South African experience over the past 34 years, or even just the South African experience even before the birth of democracy in South Africa, on this subject of state regulation of the media? What are your experiences, and what is it that what lessons can Emaswati and the Swazi government, because this program, Visionary Perspectives Eswatini, is meant also to be a kind of nodal policy influence point, where we're able to navigate the public discourse towards public policy that is effective that is people-centered, and that's not going to tip over the country over the cliff. So please, the platform is now yours.
No, Mr. Mamba, thanks very much for this opportunity, my brother, and to the two esteemed editors whom I actually, after listening to them, been writing my notes, you know, all I can say, they are brave media activists. And I would like that most journalists, though sadly, Mr. Makhubu says some of his colleagues within the editors forum seems to be embedded, seems to be on the side of the state, which is quite unfortunate. But I'll address that in my talk because I've taken those notes. So I'm saying I would like the journalists to actually resemble and replicate what the two esteemed media activists, I'm going to call them the media activists, have said and have been doing despite all the challenges that they are facing. I will premise my talk on one of the quotes that I really like, and I use it mostly in my media trainings, and journalists in South African editors use it when they feel attacked by forces outside the media, be it government, be it the private sector, and the likes. In 1994, the first democratically elected president of South Africa, Nelson Mandela, while addressing the International Press Institute World Congress, said the following words: "A critical, independent, and investigative press is a lifeblood of any democracy." Therefore, then, I normally, even when I talk to my students, I said, take this quote, unpack it. Me as a writer, I can give you 1,000 words. I would ask you to write me 200 words, but I've been in this industry for the last 30 years. I know the media, I know how government works, I know the academic space. So is to say that the media, it is not going to sweet talk or to be sweetheart of those in power specifically, because they use our taxpayers' money. Why independent? There shouldn't be any interference by the state or anyone who wants to put their hands or control the media, like the Prime Minister is doing now, coming from Rwanda, thinking that he will come and own the media. Investigative, it says, because there are three components: critical, independent, and investigative. Go, if you found allegations about Mr. X, go probe deeper and deeper and ask the difficult questions so that those that are being accused or alleged to have done wrongdoing, you give them a chance, but you place the facts on the table. That's what it says in a nutshell. So my second entry is that media freedom, Mr. Mamba, it is not only for the media to defend. In one of the articles I wrote recently in the Sowetan, whereby one of the praise singers of the then president, the guy called Karl Nihas, you should surely know him. When journalists from SANEF and editors and media activists were protesting outside the Pietermaritzburg High Court, where their colleague Karen Mon has been taken to court by the former President Zuma together with Billy Downer. He, interestingly, the previous days, he was taking pictures of Karen Mon and Billy Downer in court, him and Jimmy Manyi, laughing, making jokes about them on Twitter because they were now in the dock. So he decided to go and lecture those protesting journalists. And I was actually flabbergasted, to use that word. He really, really drove me nuts, because this is the man who usually would go and stage a one-man protest against Cyril Ramaphosa as the president of South Africa. Yet now he wants this other group to stop. What nonsense is that? So you ask yourself questions. No, we are not going to keep quiet, because some of us, as much as I've been in the media, left the media, joined government, went to academia, came back, consulting, I am a journalist, true and true. And even if a government, I would tell them that, no, we are not going to issue the statement, it's not correct, we are not going to lie to the public, we're going to give them the facts, because that's what should happen, period. So, media freedom, abantu baseSwatini, you should defend that. You should all stand in the barricade. It should not be only the media who stands in the barricade, journalists and editors, because they go Makhubu and Mr. Dlamini, they are the ones who write. No, and they didn't elect themselves to do these things. It's because they care about their country. We didn't join journalism because we wanted to be celebrities or we wanted to be seen, but because we want the best for the country. Come back to the third issue that has just been discussed and peddled around about patriotic media. What is it, patriotic media? What is it all about? Why people are talking about? Because they are found wanting, they want journalists to hide the truth. There's nothing like patriotic journalism. If you're a patriot, you will tell the truth naked as it is, sticking to and adhering to the basic tenets of journalism. You are not going to say the king didn't buy cars. While there he bought cars and Lazarus cars, fleet of them, while people of Swaziland are starving. It cannot be right, unfortunately. And if the editors in the forum are complicit, conniving, and colluding with the state, to me and to anyone else, they are embedded. They shouldn't be called editors or journalists, because I call them South Africa chancers, charlatans, and crooks masquerading as journalists. Those needs to be outed. Those needs to be flushed out. And Mr. Makhubu says that he's been in this industry for the last more than 30 years or so. This shows how important is it to have those gray hairs. When mistakes crops in within the media, they be able to help them, to pick up the young ones like Zweli, to teach them the ropes. They are the ones who are going to stand. Here, I'm a torchbearer. I am showing you the way. This is where, I've listened to his lecture. For me, it was a lecture. It was not a lecture that, we need people like him, but we need them to replicate. It cannot be him. He's tired now. He's saying that he doesn't have that strength, but he still has that institutional memory of what the media has been then during the time of King Sobhuza and what it is now, which is quite important. We need to have those. We need to have them, especially him, engaging with the young journalists in Swaziland, in South Africa, and globally about the importance of a free, critical, independent, investigative media. Let's come back to the South African point of view, which is what you wanted me to anchor on. We live in a very interesting country where media freedom is enshrined in the Constitution, not by chance, but because those who came before us, the Joe Tollos of this world, the agri-clusters of this world, the Sophie Temas of this world, the Jubi Madet of this world, the John Godano of this world, fought for media freedom to be enshrined in the Constitution. And when I even give my teachings, I said, there is no any other profession. Why should journalists stick to the media ethics? Because it's one of the subjects that I love and I teach. Hence, I'm the member of the Press Council. I abhor unethical journalists. I despise journalists who are in the pockets of the high and the mighty, but pretending as if that they are journalists while they are not, because they are charlatans, they are crooks, they are fakes. So when those who came before us, they realized that during the apartheid era, journalists were arrested, were persecuted, they spent jail. Some of them went to Robben Island, Joe Tolo of this world, Matata Sedu, Tami Mazwai, you name them. So Pesi Koboza, we know what happened when we celebrate the Media Freedom Day, which on 19th October every year, which I really celebrate with all my might. So when they said we must ensure that within the Constitution, we must ensure that there's access to information, there's freedom of the press, of association, of information. That's why they fought for, because they know what they went through during the dark days of apartheid era. I myself started journalism, interestingly, 8 years ago, 30, when democracy just was born. So I took the baton from them, and I'm trying to replicate as much as the agri-class, the Joe Tolwe, John Kolani, Tami Mazwai of this world, as much as possible, that they know and understand the importance of having the fourth estate, which is the media, hovering over all the other arms of government, your legislature, your parliament, your judiciary. It is also quite sad and tragic that what Mr. Dlamini alluded to about what he called the judiciary capture. It's quite sad and painful, because that's where that should be our last line of defense in anything and everything that we do. But when you find that now the judiciary is being used and to a point abused, it's quite painful, because now the media will suffocate. They'll put they'll strangle them. Like Mr. Makhubu said, they'll put the boot, because I like that analogy. Put the boot on your neck so that you suffocate. So now, 30 years later, we have a free press in South Africa. But should we sleep on the barricades? No, we shouldn't. The reason being, because in 2010, after the ANC elective conference, there was a discussion of the proposed Media Appeals Tribunal. Let me tell you what the media did in South Africa. They didn't sleep. They went, they fought it tooth and nail. They went to court, they didn't allow it. They brought society, they brought members of the public to understand that this is not about media freedom. This is about closing the gap whereby the public, members of the public, shouldn't even know the wrongs that is happening within the dark corridors of power. You've seen, you followed the developments within the state capture, what is happening within ESCOM, what is happening in Durban now, the protest and everything. Truth is, these things are manufactured, most of them, if not all of them, somewhere, so that they paint this country as one of the failed African states. It's deliberate ploy. I might not have evidence, but I can tell you there's deliberate ploy to ensure that this country become what they call Zimbabwe. And Tendai Biti was talking recently, and he gave us tips on how to avoid the Zimbabwe scenario. 2010, we were proud when we hosted the World Cup, first African country. Some of us then, in government, we said, we will never, ever even go that route of a failed state. But these things don't happen overnight. They plan, they plot, they connive, and when things happen like it happened in the so-called July insurrections, those things are planned just to create havoc, just to live in the memory and in the minds of the public that whoever is in power currently is failing, because Shakespeare said it long time ago, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So in South Africa, when we all stood up and fought against the proposed draconian laws of Media Appeals Tribunal, then something suddenly happened. those in power, which is government, and those with influence, which is the media, found a space to talk together. And then that led to the birth of a very kind of a interesting scenario where the late retired Judge Paslanga was appointed to look at the issues of media freedom, to look at the issue of what sort of regulation mechanism can we come up with. That was a very strategic move by the media. Government bought into it, political parties came into it, presented, everyone came. We came because some of us, we don't sit here to defend the media, but also to flip the media on the side of the media where they are transgressing in terms of media ethics. As I said earlier on, media ethics is one of subject that is very, very close to my heart. It's something that I have actually, I write about it. I even engaged in serious debates and fights with journalists who have transgressed, especially transgressors. Yes, there are mistakes. Some people say, yeah, there'll be mistakes in the media. We are human, we'll make mistakes. But we cannot allow, as the media, go and fake stories, lie and fabricate like one Peter Mbedi did with the so-called Tembisa 10, the duplicate story that is non-existent. And we must be happy and be content, or worse, bury our heads in the sand. That didn't happen. I took exception to that. It put a dent on the media. I took exception to a journalist who'll go and concoct a story and plagiarize it. No, that is not right. It's something that I will not allow. And personally, me, it has made me have enemies because at one point I worked as a government spokesperson. When spokesperson goes rogue you, I tell them, this is not right. There are ethics that are governing our respective professions. Can we stick as journalists, as communicators, to the basic ethics that are governing our respective profession, especially in the media? We'll talk about editorial independence. Let's go and be reckless just because we have the editorial independence. That on its own invites unwarranted attacks on the media. Tomorrow, there's a story you claim that there's someone who's pregnant with carrying 9 kids. That story is not there. It's pure lies, and you keep on sustaining the lies. While some of us believe that no journalist can do that, but you go to sustain the lies, you come back, you don't even apologize, or if you do come with a happy apology, it's wrong. So we're sitting in the press council with serious challenges of journalists who are rocky, are reckless, who are bringing this profession, or this noble craft actually, to a disrepute. Hence, we try to bring them in the line. But also, this thing people will keep on asking questions. You guys in the media, you think that you have a license to go and defame people and slander them without any consequences or just an apology. We need to come back and say, what needs to be done? Do we need to come with a framework that is similar to what medical practitioners or the other practitioners or accountants have, whereby if you are a serial transgressor, you get blacklisted. You can't move from Swazi Nation, you go to Mbabane News, but we know that you are a charlatan and a chancer. That's one of the challenges that we also must address as journalists, that of journalists who keeps on revolving around. But we know that this guy, where he came from, he did a lot of damage. And we need to ensure that our information is credible, is newsworthy. Mistakes should be mistakes that are, basic mistakes that are human errors, not something that really is a deliberate lie, misinformation, and even propaganda, which our constitution doesn't even allow. So it's nice in South Africa. Broadcasting is subscribed to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission under the Independent Communications Authority, ICASA. Print journalists under the Press Council of South Africa, which I belong, and Zweli is also a member. So we should strengthen those things and not give them an opportunity or ammunition to shoot at us. In South Africa, yes, we are still on the barricade. It is not going to be easy. It was never easy. But the important thing is to stand and say, media freedom. It is not only for the media to defend, but it's for the public, and we're doing it for the journalism is for the public good. So maybe I'll basically pause it there, though I took so many notes, and I'll say we should expose those embedded editors, Mr. Makhubu, who are siding with the states, and they don't see any value. I'll say it again for the third time. Those are chancers, those are charlatans, those are crooks. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sepotokele. I think you have given us a very, very rounded kind of input around some of the broad contours of what the media should be doing in the national development project more broadly. I see that we have a guest also in our chats there. I'm talking to the government spokesperson who is actually accusing you, Mr. Sepotokele, of being biased and spreading propaganda on this platform. It's interesting because he has urged other people not to engage with the Swaziland news, but he's quite busy there on our chat right now, which is good. This is what we want. So I've responded to him actually to say he should come here on Swaziland News and we will host him here on Visionary Perspectives Eswatini so that he can deal with these issues that he is claiming are propaganda. We can open also to the public to call in and engage with the government spokesperson. So he's listening to us. This is very good. This is what we want. But
can I just ask a simple question? Who is he and what is he saying?
His name is Mr. Alpheus Numalo. I don't want to derail this conversation. You can see the comments later on Facebook there. I've taken screenshots as well, so that even if he deletes, we already have that. So that's fine. You've really given us this neat nexus between a democratic state, the principles of free expression, the access to information, and public participation, and also the accountability aspects of how a government must be held accountable, given that it is in charge of the public purse and also in charge of the national development agenda, which I really appreciate because it has helped to expand the kind of boundaries of this conversation that we are having today. And I wanted to ask the question to you, what are the dangers of a captured media? What are the dangers of, and this might also then apply to editors as well and Shoban, to a silent media? Because what we see in Swaziland largely is that the media is so much under attack that people self-censure, people don't really write freely because of the repercussions that come after that expression. So we see in South Africa this narrative, Mr. Sepotokele, that the media, even in South Africa, to a certain extent, even though it is largely free, but it is captured. People talk about, for example, the rich and mighty in South Africa, I won't mention names, that are controlling the media and therefore controlling public narratives. What would be your kind of inputs to us as the people of Swaziland around this question, particularly because I think you've done a very good job also in buttressing how you ring fence and protect media freedoms constitutionally, so that the bedrock of the democratic state becomes constitutionalized in ways and means that allow and give impetus to these rights.
Okay, no, fine. Thanks very much. I would wanted to engage more with the so-called Swazi spokesperson, because I've done that work. I've trained spokespersons. I know them. I love debates, and I don't like like half-baked things and innuendos. All right, this claim of media capture, it has no scientific base. Why? The media, it is privately owned, and if they appoint you as an editor, you have the editorial independence, which is the freedom for you as an editor to make decisions without interference from the owners of the publication. If that happens, which surely it happens in some certain publications, you know what happens to them? Go and check their sales. Go and check their circulation. Go and check their adverse revenue, because people no longer trust them as credible newspapers. They are going down and down. So where I come from, I know that an editor worth his or her salt would rather walk away when there's undue, unnecessary editorial hands of coming out, interference. There's independence, there's interference. A journalist fights for their independence. And those who knows that they are not worth the salt of being called editors, hence they pander, they take pressure from the owners, advertisers, and external forces. Truth is, there is going to be pressures in the media. We've done that. I've learned media studies, and I'm teaching it. Pressures in the media come in different forms and shapes. It's owners, it's advertisers, it's pressure groups, it's political parties. How you as an editor say, no, here, this story that you say is not a story. We've done all the checks and balances. This story stands, it's credible. But not getting a call from an editor because from the owner, because the friend called the owner to do the work. There's nothing wrong, because Mr. Mamba, media ethics are not an easy thing. They require level-headed person like Mr. Makhubu, who will sacrifice his life, who will go into jail, who will deny opportunities, who people will put will ostracize and isolate him, because you are standing for the truth. And when people tomorrow say, wait, where is the evidence of what you do? Here, you have it. You've done all the checks and balances. So this media capture narrative is something that these phrases that some people like throwing around just because. But you ask them, like you ask a spokesperson, because I want to engage a spokesperson. Has he ever been in any newsroom? Has he ever engaged with any journalist? Has he ever tried to? Because you cannot be defending the indefensible all the time because called off a spokesperson. That for me really annoys me, because I was also a spokesperson and I know what a role of spokesperson is. I'm teaching them, and I've taught about dozens of them. And that's why he must come to my class at Bosenvist. I also wanted to train him, because you see, you cannot come and say people must not listen, but we are not putting facts on the table. Say on this particular issue, you are here. What I'm talking about is what the colleagues have talked about. The issue of cars has been there in the public domain. It cannot be lies that the king bought so many cars for the wife. Is taxpayers' money, were they necessary, were they needed? In South Africa, we also write about that. If ministers buys a car more than what he should be buying, we ask questions, and we will expose them. We must expose them. We are not going to kowtow just to listen to someone who's singing for his supper and come and say, I'm spreading propaganda. That's nonsense.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much. Comrade, for those inputs. I think we have come to a time where we want now to kind of wrap up this conversation. But it's very interesting that we really do have the government spokesperson. It means that this program is really being followed by many people, and this is very good. I just want to say that to the government spokesperson, he is saying I should shift to another forum so that he can then come and defend it or clarify whatever he wants. But just want to let him know that is not going to happen. We're not going to shift this program on account of him, but we are willing and our hands are open to host him here on this program. And we will be as objective as we can as we do that. We are willing also to reconvene this panel to have a conversation with him if he would like to have that conversation publicly. So I want us to wrap up. This has really been an intellectually robust conversation. And thank you very much, Mr. Sepotokele, for really coming out and giving us a very rich outlook in terms of the state of media and its role and how it must be discharging its functions in a democratic state. And indeed, we know that Swaziland is not a democratic state, and perhaps the comparison with South Africa would be best described as a misnomer, because Swaziland is a dictatorship. But we believe that Swaziland is going to be a democracy very soon. And by very soon, I mean very soon. And it is important for us to have these kinds of conversations and people like you who can help us, even from a research perspective, to prepare for a new nation state, a new constitution for the country. And that constitution that we envision will be a constitution that kind of embellishes the rights of eMaswati insofar as the rights to freedom of expression and the broader civil and political rights and liberties are concerned. I want to now give you, each one of you, the opportunity to say your last words of reflection. And if there are issues that you think perhaps we have not touched on in this conversation and are very salient and important for the viewers at home, please do feel free to articulate those issues. And I will come back and start with you again, Shobane, on this one. And thank you for coming back. I see that you had dropped out a bit.
Yes, thank you. I think, first of all, because I dropped out, I missed some of what you said, but I can tell you this, that I'm a believer in our constitution. I just think that it is not being interpreted the way it was intended, because its intention are in conflict with the interests of those in power. That's what I believe. And I've studied constitutional law, so I don't say that in a vacuum. Perhaps as a parting shot, I should say this. One of the things that the Prime Minister said at our breakfast meeting was that our kind of journalism was sending was not helpful to young journalists going forward, people who aspire to be journalists in the future. In other words, he was setting bad standards. I just want to say this on that point, because it's very important. You know, I first walked into the newsroom, I was 18 years old, and now I'm over 50, and I've seen a lot. But what is most critical and should worry him too, and everybody in this country, is this. With the challenges we've faced, some of us going to jail, going to court, having decrees passed or rather signed in order to destroy us. What has happened is, if you go to the University of Eswatini, which is the highest institution of learning in this country, they have a journalism program. Two things have happened there. One, at some point, in government's annoyance and anger with the media, they actually took a position not to fund journalism as a subject. I don't know if you know that, but there was a time when government felt funding students who want to study journalism was not necessary, and there was a lot of lobbying to stop government from doing that. Fortunately, those who lobbied were successful, but that's how that. But it sort of gives you an impression of how much resentment there is towards journalism in the country, where government takes a decision that we won't fund this thing. It means they don't want anyone who writes in this country. The experiences some of us have had in a West still is this. The students at the university, and you can verify this with lecturers at the university, once they've moved from the first year to the next years, they are given a choice to choose what to specialize in, whether they become PR agents, communications, or writers, and stuff like that. The vast majority of them do not want to be writers. And the reason they don't want to specialize in writing is because they say being a writer in this country is a dangerous project. It's not healthy. So you imagine a situation where a child is talking to a parent, discussing what to do now that there's choices, and a parent saying, no, don't become a writer, because being a writer is not a healthy route to take. You will get arrested like Bheki Makhubu. There's a hostility. So, that is a sad indictment on the country, because being a writer is not just about writing news for newspapers. It means quite a critical majority of young people in this country will never, for instance, become internationally renowned novelists, for instance, because they are discouraged from being writers, because knowing how to write in this country is seen as an endangered area of profession. That to me is sad, but it's our reality. So when someone like the Prime Minister says we're setting bad standards, and yet in him trying to fix these standards, he's chasing young people away from the profession by making threats. By those who do, I don't know if he will, sending journalists to jail for simply writing truth. Because in all my troubles, one thing we can never disagree on is that I never got my facts wrong. It's just that those who had power didn't like the public to know what I had to report on them. So you have writing in this country is being criminalized. And that's the truth. It's being criminalized by those who are by as high an office as the Prime Minister's office. That is why he's speaking like this, calling people who experts who have no idea what the hell they're doing, and trying to muzzle the press, and sending a message to young children that he sees as setting bad standards for, by saying, don't go there. We don't want writers in this country because they tell the public things we don't want them to know. I think that should bother everybody. Thank you.
Indeed, it should. And I think I share your concerns around the paucity of or the underdevelopment of the entire media industry in Swaziland. It's perhaps a microcosm of the Swazi society, like you are saying. People aren't writing. People aren't encouraged because even writing is not rewarding for them. But I suppose that we will perhaps lean on people like yourselves, Shobane, to now that you are you are becoming the big tree, to do kind of compile your memos or whatever book about Swaziland that we can drink from in the near future. What's your sense on that? I'm throwing a challenge.
I guess we have that responsibility as writers to tell the Swazi story. I mean, one of the biggest problems that is faced by this country, and you can talk to researchers particularly and mainly I've spoken to some of them in South Africa. If there's one country that is under-researched, yet has a minefield of information, not just about what's going on today, but even in the past about the Swazi state. I mean, I was talking to one book writer a few years ago, and he said he had been at the National Archives, and he said this country is a gold mine for researchers. But how are you going to produce researchers when you are when a country is hostile towards writing? Because the net effect of that is this. Even people at university, and here I'm talking about academics, they are, because they are part of the society we live in, are left not sure whether doing academic research and writing about it might not get them into trouble. So they become reluctant to do that. And I know that at the university here, research is not a strong point because it's not encouraged, because writing is not what makes the authorities happy. Now, it's very interesting that you have a prime minister who has, I think he has one or two master's degrees, at least he has one, who is therefore a specialist researcher, but who is hostile towards writing and therefore killing the idea of other younger people being researchers, but saying it's the fault of the media because they've lowered their standards. He doesn't seem to appreciate the power of his words and his office in building a better society. I think it's an indictment on what kind of society we want to take forward. So what is going to happen in this country going forward, and I think it's unfortunate that it has happened anyway, is that only foreigners will tell the story of this country, because a Maswati who want to tell the story might go to jail for doing so, might find themselves at loggerheads with the authorities who will say ukbalelendo, even if it is true, and brings perspective on the history of this country. I mean, this country is one of the most looked down upon in the region. And the reason is not because we're bad people or we have lower status, it's because we don't tell our story. And the reason we don't tell our story is because within the country, we're not allowed to. Because if you do, you get into trouble. And only the brave can do that. The question then is it worth the trouble? Is it worth the trouble to lose your life when you are doing something good for the country? And what is most sad is the people who exercise this kind of power are here today and gone tomorrow, and they've ruined people's lives, they've ruined the country. And yet when we meet them in the streets after being in office, they want us to celebrate them as if they did something good for us. I can't reconcile my mind with that kind of thinking. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Shoban. Indeed, the question of academic freedom, and generally just the freedom to express ourselves is something that is muted. And I would say perhaps we need to find innovative ways to do these things. If we need to write under pseudonyms, for example, and things like those, we should do those things. But the important thing is we must begin to write and to publish and to go on YouTube, digitalize. Some of these things you don't even need to write. Maybe just have a series where you're talking about it time and again and record it digitally, and that's it. Editor Dlamini, over to you.
Thank you, Njolini, for the opportunity. As we conclude, maybe I will conclude by telling a story that I once did with the King's office and what I learned from that experience. And when they constructed what is known as today the Manvulo Hall, where the king meets international diplomats and hold his important meetings, I once received a call from the employees there They told me that their rights were being violated. They were not getting paid. When they get injured, they were not getting compensated. And when I called the CEO, I was working for one of the local newspapers at the time. When I called the CEO, his name was Bheki Makhubu. He told me that who gave you the permission to investigate the king. And I wasn't investigating the king, but I was demanding answers why the people who were employed there were not compensated when they get injured. They were paid low salaries. So it came to this, our previous discussion about the fact that the people who are violating media freedom in this country is not only the king. There are people who are exercising some of the king's absolute powers and trying to make sure that they hide under the king's wings in violating the freedom of the media. And we need to understand, and everybody must understand, that when a government fights the media, it's not actually the media that they are fighting. They're trying to silence the voice of the people. Because as I'm just telling this story, the people wanted to have their voice heard through the media. So when a government fights the media, they're actually trying to silence the voice of the people. And once they succeed in doing that, that will mean dictatorship will rule, corruption will be rife, there will be a culture of impunity, and no one will say anything. And today we are talking about Bheki Makhubu. Bheki Makhubu, I would like to congratulate you, sir. You have done so much for this country. And I will recall when you were arrested for writing a story about one of the kings in Nkosikazi, and they subsequently arrested for criticizing the then Chief Justice, that's Michael Romatipeti. And when the judicial crisis erupted, some of us, we were young in the media, we knew, we were not aware what is really happening with not understanding of what we have now. But you did well, and we want to make sure that we maintain your legacy, because some people might ask us where we get the courage to hold the government accountable. You cannot just come from the air and be brave. There are people who inspire you to do things right. And one of the journalists is Bheki Makhubu. And we hope all the journalists, the young journalists, will come after us. They must know that you don't just come from the air. Things have happened in this country, and we have learned that until we become brave and face the oppression and report, then this country will be destroyed. I conclude, Mr. Mamba. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ngosi, for those final reflections. And we appreciate the work that you are doing. And thank you also for the words of encouragement that you have given to Shobane for his very, very important historical work that he has done for country, which is what I would say is being patriotic, if we were actually to define patriotism. Because patriotism is not blind loyalty. It's not following people even when you can see that the entire nation is being led towards a cliff, and therefore all of us should not raise our voices to say, look, we're going towards a cliff. There is a better path that we should all be taking for a better country. And this is where we are at the moment in our historical epoch. So thank you, gentlemen, to both of you. Let us conclude with our guest, Mr. Sebotokele. Please also give us your final reflections and words of encouragement to Maswati.
Okay, yeah, no. Mr. Mamba, you seem to be reading my script, because I was just writing here two things that were touched on right now. One of them is this issue. Now, glad you've answered it in a very succinct manner, because people like coining phrase. I'll tell you, in South Africa, we coined phrases, you know, from Jacob Zuma calling us clever blacks because we ask questions. You know, called clever blacks. And there are people who'll go sit in the corner and say the media is not patriotic. We need patriotic media. What is that exactly are they looking for? Are they looking for praise singers? Are they looking for parrots? As read so, it can be blind loyalty. It cannot be a patriotic South African, a patriotic African, a patriotic, you know, you because you hold your country dearly, because you know you want to expose wrongdoing and celebrate good. Hence, it is patriotic journalism. I asked one question during the World Cup 2010 to some editors. I said, how are you going to balance the story of the World Cup 2010? Assumingly, one of the top stars then from Brazil, Kaká, loses his luggage at the airport or gets mugged. There's a World Cup. How do you, because these are the things that we sometimes don't, you know, they seem far away from us. We just react when they happen. But say, as an editor, think of how you're going to balance the story of Kaká and balancing the story of telling the of World Cup. You are not going to ignore it. Happened. He was marked or lost his luggage. That happened. So patriotic journalism doesn't mean that you have to bury your head in the sand and say, I see no evil and I hear no evil and I speak no evil. No, it's not that. Wrong is wrong. You must expose it. But Makhubu, in my 30 years experience in journalism, I finally put, from my own perspective, a book that is coming this year, October. I can now, reveal it to you now. It's been in the cooker for the last 13 years. A book about the subject that I love the most I teach, the relationship between journalists and government spokespersons, between the media and government. From my perspective, the last 8 years, what has been the relationship? And I'm also profiling some of the spokespersons who've done exceptionally well in terms of, building the relationship between those in power and those with influence. And I'm also, because I've written even those articles, I'm also exposing those who literally, and worst of them, they were journalists, most of them, who literally destroyed their relationship between the media and government. And they were allowed, they did that with impunity. And I single-handedly pointed them out. So I would suggest, your age, I'm 55 now, I'm still very young. I don't consider myself that old. Ensure that you put a memo, you have that institutional memory. Stop being afraid of is there a reason now to do it? We are being silenced. No, you cannot throw your hands in the air. You've been jailed already. You've paid the price. You can pay more price because you love your country. Themba Maseko, the second DG of the Government Communication Information System, GCIS, you know, he went to the state capture and spoke about his experiences with Jacob Zuma. He is the one who even wrote the book, which I recommend to my students. I said, please go and read Themba Maseko's book, For My Country, how he sacrificed for his country, because he's a patriot. Those are not patriots are the ones who are driving expensive cars staying in estates, knowing that they've stolen government money. They don't want to be exposed. I'm not saying people shouldn't drive them, people shouldn't. If you've done that in a legal way, that's fine. In closing, started with a quote, I'm going to close with a quote. This quote comes from the third US President, Thomas Jefferson, who said, I quote, were it left to me to decide whether we should have a government without newspapers or newspapers without a government, I should not hesitate a moment to prefer the latter. The media is powerful. The media is important, is a pillar of a democracy or any other, even not a democracy, even is a pillar of any country, the media. Thanks a lot.
Very powerful quote there to close off the conversation. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your inputs today. I hope that they are going to not only ignite a public conversation around this intended regulation by the state of the media, but also occasion a sense of reflection, deep reflection about the path that we are on as a country, and the kind of new social contract that we want to build for a future Swaziland, and whether or not that path is the correct path for generations and generations of Emaswati to come. I want to, with all honor and humility, to thank you very much for your time. I know it's a Sunday, we host this program on Sundays, but you have given the importance of the subject matter, you have made yourselves available for this very important conversation. We also hope that policymakers, academics, activists, and others who are watching and listening to this program will learn something from it and will take some snippets of the kind of inputs that have been made to inform not only how they think about public policy, but also how they implement, and use in very responsible ways the levers of state in advancing our economic development aspirations as a nation. Siyabonga kakhulu. As Visionary Perspectives Eswatini, we've come now to an end of this program, and we are hoping to see you again. At the same time, we always sign off by saying that the struggle never sleeps, and that it is time for change for our country. So give good evening, Swaziland, Eswatini, and good evening to our fellow panelists. Have a good day further. Amandla.